Welcome to another editorial roundtable hosted by Ward's Automotive. We're talking about engines today. The Ward's 10 best engines for 2015. We had 37 engines that we evaluated, and just so you're aware, that's 27 new or improved engines plus the 10 returning winners from last year. So we have 8 editors at Ward's who are part of the judging process, and I've got them here with me today. To my right, Steve Finley, Drew Winter, Christy Swinesberg, James Amond, and Byron Pope. So we go about picking these engines by driving all the vehicles. We have them here in Metro Detroit between the months of October and November. We look closely at fuel economy, and of course, we're paying attention to all the new technology that's on board. We are looking at horsepower and torque numbers. We are looking at engines as they relate to others in their segments. So, of course, a Corvette engine isn't going to compete, say, with a 4-cylinder naturally aspirated engine. So we focus on an engine as it relates to others in its own segment. So we have our 10 engines this year, and I'm going to read them for you in order. You'll see them on the screen also. BMW i3 electric, and also the extended range version. So you can buy it either with just pure battery, or you can get a 2-cylinder range extender as well. Chevrolet Corvette 6.2-liter LT1 V8. Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat 6.2-liter supercharged Hemi V8. Ford Fiesta 1-liter EcoBoost 3-cylinder. Hyundai Tucson fuel cell vehicle. Mini Cooper 1.5-liter 3-cylinder turbo. Ram 1500 Eco Diesel 3-liter V6. Subaru WRX 2-liter Turbo 4 Boxer. Volkswagen Golf 1.8-liter TSI, it's a 4-cylinder. And also the Volvo S60, the T5 2-liter Drive-E Turbo 4. So we're going to talk about them in order. Later in the conversation, we will talk a bit about some of those engines that were close on the list but just didn't make it. So let's start out with the BMW i3. Drew, you want to talk a bit about the i3 and why this is an important achievement?
Well, I think we've driven a lot of electric cars now, and there seems to be more coming every year. And after a while, I mean, particularly when we're driving one after another, a lot of them start to seem alike. And this clearly is a new type of vehicle designed, I think, for a new type of driving enthusiast. And I think we all notice that it makes some great sounds. It delivers power. It really is fun to drive in a different sort of way. It's different from any other electric car I think we've tested. And I really got a kick out of it. And you add the range extender, we found the value of that when temperatures dipped during our testing down below freezing, and we saw some vehicles run out of juice. The range extender is there with a guaranteed extra 50, 60 miles or whatever. Yep. So, but it was really a cool car. I see something there that I don't see in most of the EVs we test.
Yeah, I think one of the things for me was what you mentioned, is trying to imbue a little bit of character into it. Because electric vehicles, as great as they are, they tend to be a little flavorless.
Yeah.
But you get that great whooshing sound, and it's really an exhilarating car to drive.
And it's different than the Volt, because the Volt is range extended as well.
Right.
But this sort of is flipped, where you get more EV range, less EREV range. And you had it for a whole weekend, and you had some fueling.
Yeah.
Adventures.
And it's kind of weird when you go to the gas station, you fill up and the tank's full, with 1 gallon or whatever. I was interested in your feelings as somebody who owns a Volt. What you think of how this sort of reverse strategy, does that make sense to you, or you think the Volt strategy is a better one?
It's a different strategy for a different type of buyer. Some people are really going to want that extra EV range. With the Volt, you get 30 to 50 depending on the weather. With this, it's what is the number, Tom? Do you have the range for the i3?
Maybe
EREV?
55.
Yeah, they say 150, in perfect conditions. But we found in the really cold weather that we were getting about 61 miles of electric range, And I think gasoline, when we filled up the small tank with gasoline, we were getting somewhere around 55 miles of range. So
okay, it's kind of
clearly the cold
really,
weather impacts it.
Yeah, it's basically flipped from the Volt because you get 250 to 300 miles of range with the range extender and the Volt. So I liked it. I liked some of the noises it made. It made kind of sort of Jetson-y space age noises.
Yeah.
Well,
like
is
bloop,
the
bloop.
quacking supposed to be desirable? Is that one of the things you were talking about as being quirky? The sound it makes when it's in the gasoline mode?
No, actually, when you're driving down the road, it makes this kind of whirring noise that
Sounds like a gyroscope.
Yeah, that it just gives you kind of a space age feel, and then
Because some people might not like that.
And then the other thing is too the range extender. I mean, unlike the Volt, which is a real whole car engine. The range extender on the i3 is basically a little motorcycle engine,
Yeah.
and I don't think you notice it so much when you're on the expressway and the transitions, but you do notice it when you're sparked in traffic or whatever, and then you hear it, and it's a different experience, but it's kind of saving your bacon at the same time. So.
I like the idea that BMW has really innovated to a great extent with this vehicle. Thermoplastic body panels, carbon fiber chassis. I mean, they really spent a lot of time and money on this. It's the lightest EV that we've driven, which really helps with the 0 to 60 times. It's the fastest EV that we've driven in terms of 0 to 60 times. And I like the idea that BMW has really baked this vehicle into their entire product portfolio. Some of the EVs out there are more like compliance cars for certain markets, but here in this case, BMW has this vehicle in like 285 out of 330-some dealerships across the United States. So they're selling this vehicle everywhere, and it's clearly they're trying to create a new paradigm for EVs.
And I think it is. The whole idea is sort of taking a new look at personal mobility. It's like an aspirational car for people who aren't car enthusiasts, but they view many times, I think, cars as a necessary evil. But this is something, I think they can really aspire to because it's green and it's practical and it's, I don't know, there was something really different that I think BMW accomplished.
Well, like
with this.
James says, it has personality, which sometimes is lacking in EVs.
It has a heavy regen braking, which is
does.
something that we should mention because it's very different if
I
you've never
like it.
experienced it.
I like it because you can drive the vehicle with just one pedal and never actually touch the brake. I remember the old Mini E when it was launched. It truly was a one-pedal vehicle, and of course there is a brake pedal in the BMW i3, but you rarely have to touch it unless some idiot has just changed lanes in front of you, and you really have to stop suddenly. But if you're in normal driving situations, you learn quickly just how to feather off of the accelerator, and the vehicle will just stop itself right at a stoplight, and you can just sit there with your feet off the pedals. And so, yeah, it's going to take some adjustment for some drivers. Some people might not like all that regeneration, but there's a reason for it, and it's sending more power back to the battery. So let's move on to the Corvette, 6.2-liter LT1 V8. Of course, 460 horsepower, 465 pound-feet of torque with the performance exhaust system that we tested, and the 8-speed automatic, which really makes a difference in this vehicle. We ended up getting somewhere, some people got up to 22 miles per gallon testing this vehicle, which is pretty impressive. So, James, tell us about the Corvette.
Fantastic engine. Very little to dislike about it, and as you mentioned, getting some pretty good fuel economy. And you mentioned, this is an engine competition, but here I think is a good demonstration how a transmission can make a really good engine great. I think it really ups the bar on this. It improves the drivability and certainly improves the efficiency of the automatic transmission. And even in just a year's time, they were able to add other elements to it. That make it, let's just say, much more attractive to the discerning enthusiast.
Mm-hmm. And I recall talking to Drew a bit about this, the LT1 engine, when we had the Hellcat in the office, and that was going to be evaluated for 10 best engines, and I'm thinking, geez, is there room on the list for both the Corvette and the Hellcat? And Drew's opinion was absolutely there's room for them. So.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely room when you have a couple of standout standout V8s like this. And I know the Corvette. We've talked about this a little bit before. Was where even though it's a cam and block engine, it really fits that car because it's not just old technology, because without having overhead cams, it significantly makes the engine a lot lower. That really makes the Corvette possible, the low hood on the Corvette.
It's the only way that you could have a Corvette.
So here the engine, the architecture actually really defines, this whole iconic car. And I think that's, it goes on beyond the realm of combustion, where this engine just plays this huge role in delivering a low center of gravity and all that stuff.
There's some fresh stuff on that car.
Oh, wait,
you have the cylinder deactivation,
direct injection,
direct injection,
aluminum block. They really, this is all part of the all new small block engine family, which of course has other engines in the the pickup trucks and in the SUVs. But yeah, I mean, the small block, as it is today, has redefined the idea of cam and block. Who we used to think that pushrod engines were going away, but GM invested heavily in updating it, and it's definitely paying off for them. We're going to move on to the Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat, 6.2-liter supercharged Hemi V8, 707 horsepower. You heard that right. 650 pound-feet of torque. In our testing, we were getting 15 miles per gallon in this beast. And I really enjoyed driving it. And I recall driving, of course, the GT500 a couple years ago when it made our list. And I recall that vehicle requiring a little more finesse when you were accelerating. Keeping that in a straight line was a bit difficult. Now with the Challenger SRT Hellcat, it's about 700 pounds heavier. It's a much bigger vehicle. And mass is usually the enemy, but in this case, it's not. I mean, that mass helps to keep everything stable, and you can drive it pretty much every day, I would think.
I agree. That car was very easy to drive with that much power, and I had spoken with Chrysler engineers who said that was one of their objectives from the onset, was to make that car possible for somebody to use as a daily driver, and then a weekend car too for the track. And I think they pulled that off, and with that much power, that was a phenomenal engineering job.
Yeah.
And that's really what people ask me when I talking to some of my buddies at the gym or whatever, that they'll ask about what the biggest thing about the Hellcat, what you notice most, and I tell them, believe it or not, it's how refined it is, how easily it is to drive around town, and it just doesn't scare you at every stoplight. It certainly can scare the hell out of you when it wants to, but you can, if you use a light foot, it gets decent fuel economy, and it's just not like, and I know we talked to Bob Lee at Chrysler that they didn't want just a street legal race car. That wasn't their goal. They didn't want something that was just going to be this really outrageous, hard to control car, and I think they absolutely delivered on this.
And the exhaust note was beautiful.
Spot on.
And
Spot on. At startup, idle, at wide open throttle.
Yeah, it was one of the things too about a daily driver is the 2-key system. The red keys for all the power, and what was it, 500 horsepower if you use the black key?
I think it's 500 horsepower if you hand off the black key to the valet or to your 17-year-old son.
Right, like they can't get in trouble with 500 horsepower.
Steve came up with the best line, though. He said, "This is not a car you want to give to your kid for their 16th birthday."
No.
Or your valet for that matter.
But it's interesting, in terms of the fuel economy, they've got this innovative 2-stage fuel pump that when you don't need all the fuel, it's working at this level. When you're really pushing it, now you're really pumping a lot of fuel into that into that engine. And they were saying that you can fill a quart glass or a pint glass in about 7 seconds if at wide open throttle. If all the injectors were pointed into that, 7 seconds to fill that with all the fuel. So
yeah.
a lot of
the environmentalists really love that one. Yeah.
Well,
they need to fill my Guinness that quickly. I tell you. But the one thing you did mention about this though is that like that two-stage fuel pump. They didn't just bolt a supercharger onto
Absolutely
this thing.
not.
This was a lot of engineering went behind this.
Yeah, it wouldn't have made on the list if that was the case. Obviously,
I was going to say that this is with this engine and with the Corvette engine. This is not a case of letting the frat boys of the engineering school out and trying to fix their damage after they've done doing what they did. These are well-engineered engines. These engines get pretty good fuel economy. And it's a lot of people think it's some exercise in sinful engineness, and neither is. They're both.
Is.
Well, it kind of is. Okay, but it's done responsibly.
Yeah.
Well, it's also I wouldn't overlook the point that you do get to let the engineers run a little bit on this. They spend so much of their time trying to meet fuel economy targets, all these efficiency targets, and here they just let them run. And do what engineers do, and especially the guys that really have the gasoline going through their veins.
Really, and you take an engine like this, really, it isn't just engineering. It's marketing, and some of it is HR, really, because, you're giving a great, fun project to your best engineers to work on and let go. And then also, this engine, the attention, the engine, which is only going to sell a few thousand copies a year, probably, it's brought this Dodge brand, which was kind of languishing in the shadows. It has brought it front and center.
They're selling a lot of challenges.
It's on the cover of every magazine. It's people talking about it, getting people in the dealerships just to see one. I mean, it performed what it was supposed to do, flawlessly.
The question is, how long can they do this? Given the kind of fuel economy targets that are coming, you start to wonder, Jesus. Is this the swan song for the for the muscle car?
You say that every year.
Yeah, we've been saying that for at least 10, 15 years.
Yeah, so why do we always forgive poor fuel economy in muscle cars but not in pickup trucks?
Well, because you know what? I'll tell you one reason. There's volume and there's use. I mean, pickup trucks get used every day, and people put a lot of miles on them. A lot of these, I really feel that in the case of the Hellcat, most of the drivers are probably going to spend more time polishing it than they're going to spend driving it.
Tell you what, if you give me a pickup truck that makes 707 horsepower, let's see. If it can make 15 miles per gallon, that's a pretty good number. But I would be surprised.
The main thing, though, is volume. I mean, they're not going to sell that many, particularly Hellcats and some of these big.
So let's move on to the 3-cylinder EcoBoost in the Ford Fiesta. This engine delivered 38 miles per gallon as we tested it, and that's a pretty good number. Of course, you can do better if you really want to do some some hypermiling, but. Out the door, this vehicle was $17,530. That's with with some options. So this is kind of our bread and butter engine. We love to have those very affordable engines. We like to find those every year that is accessible to everybody. So tell us about the EcoBoost.
Well, I just think like you mentioned the mileage. I couldn't get personally under 35 miles per gallon, and driving it.
How hard you drove it?
No matter how hard, and you don't see that. You don't see cars now that deliver even what the stickers say. In average driving, and it's very rare. And this car delivered diesel kind of fuel efficiency, and the 5-speed transmission I enjoyed. I think it's a manual. It mates well with that engine. I thought for a 3-cylinder, the NVH was phenomenal. I just think it's a great little engine for a car for that car. And it's heading above the 3 cylinders I've driven in the past. And like Drew, you were talking about the NVH on that car earlier, about how they counteracted the
rocket forces and everything like that. They did. I mean, there was some heavy duty. This is a base engine, They did some heavy duty engineering on this to. Instead of going the route of balance shafts, which add a lot of cost and hurt fuel economy, they went to a whole different engineering strategy where they were able to balance the rocking forces. I think they did a tremendous job of making it a very smooth engine, and I think it's because our personal cars are both. I mean, we're used to driving 4 cylinders with sticks, and we both really liked it. And I just got such a kick out of getting into what was basically a base level car. An inexpensive Fiesta, and you get this wonderful little, spunky engine that makes these great noises and has a lot of power. And, I kept thinking, my God, I'm driving around this car. It has only, like 150 more cc than my motorcycle. Yeah. I mean, it does a lot. And to me, it really made, a 5-speed manual, not some fancy 6-speed or whatever. It was a lot of fun. I really got a kick out of it. And I was really happy it made the list.
And this reflects also, we were saying the flip of letting the engineers loose and making the Hellcat or something like that. This is paying attention and serious attention to a small engine, inexpensive car. And I think that's almost revolutionary, because in the old days that didn't happen. If you bought a cheap car, you got a cheap car with a lousy engine. And that is not the case today. They are meticulous. Maybe they're not having as much fun as the Hellcat powertrain engineers, but they're putting out some pretty good products on these small engines.
And I think, they've been raving about it in Europe now for a number of years. But I think the fact that it comes to the U.S. and they can sell it in the U.S., I mean, I think that is a big deal. And I think we have to recognize their achievements in being able to really bring a small, tiny, fuel-efficient engine to the U.S. that people are going to buy, and not because they have to, because they want to.
Okay. We're going to talk about the Hyundai Tucson fuel cell vehicle. This is a first for Ward's 10 Best Engines. We've never had a fuel cell vehicle. Of course, we've never really tested many fuel cell vehicles anyway. But we all enjoyed driving this vehicle. It's a 5-passenger CUV, and when you drive it, it all feels so normal. It feels like like it has an internal combustion engine doing the work, except that it's fueled by hydrogen. But the numbers are decent. 134 horsepower, 221 pound-feet of torque. With the tank full, it's 265 miles in terms of range, and it does 0 to 60 in 12.5 seconds. Not bad. Of course, fueling is an issue. You're wondering, how can we fuel this thing up? And that infrastructure is coming in. California is the focus for this vehicle right now. But the pricing is fairly attractive. At a lease rate, it's $499 a month with $2,000 or $3,000, $2,000 down,
and free hydrogen.
Yeah.
Free hydrogen.
And all the fuel is free. So hats off for Hyundai for doing that. I mean, they're really trying to fire up this market, get it going. Everybody needs to be putting zero-emission vehicles out there, and of course, we've seen the challenges with the battery electrics. We haven't seen the battery technology yet that is going to give us really extended range. So here in this case, Hyundai's given us 265 miles of range with a battery, or with hydrogen. So interesting.
Yeah, well, I think that it's what we're seeing now. I mean, as we've been talking to everybody over the past couple of months, that really the issue is that EVs are fine in urban settings, in the mega cities, but getting a vehicle, a good full-size vehicle or a large vehicle that can go 300 miles on one charge it's going to be extremely difficult or very, very expensive. I mean, the Tesla's doing a pretty good job, costs $100,000. In the future, I think we're looking at that same conundrum. So, I mean, what's coming out now is what looks like a new generation of fuel cell vehicles to, down the road, create larger vehicles that can go long distances that are zero emissions.
And what I enjoyed about it was it just drove like a car. There was nothing different about it. I think Hyundai set out to make it just as normal as possible, to get people to accept that technology, to show them that you can have this without any sacrifices. And I think that car, if you didn't look at the badge in the back or had to refuel it, you would never know that was a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. And I found the range I got more miles than the range indicator told me I had, which is the exact opposite in every EV I've ever driven.
Yeah, it seems like the linear sense of fuel. You consume hydrogen apparently at a similar rate as you would gasoline.
Right.
So the needles seem to be going down, at a calmer pace, whether you had the HVAC on or
Didn't
not.
matter, yeah.
Didn't really matter. With electrics, of course, when you're running the fan or the HVAC, you're going to lose some range. You don't seem to have that same anxiety with the with the fuel cell.
Well, we've all. Oh, go ahead.
It did seem like the cold weather affected it a bit. I mean, we don't want to give the impression that it's completely,
Perfect?
You'll get perfect. Yes, yes,
impervious
perfect.
to the
yes.
weather. Yeah.
I was just struck by how quiet it is. After having talked to some engineers from other companies that are doing fuel cells, it's very, very difficult to isolate those noises and really eliminate them, as Hyundai has done. So I think that's a huge achievement for people that don't want to hear all those strange compressor sounds and.
Yeah, I guess I'm the oldest one here. I've been test driving fuel cells for probably 15 years or since the 1990s or whatever. And really, until quite recently, they were all just science projects. I mean, they made all sorts of weird noises and behaved kind of weird. They were just quirky, yeah. And then you needed a whole minivan to fit the engine in, you know. And that's the other thing is that Hyundai's done tremendously well. It's just package the thing. You lift up the hood, and I think an average
like an
person
engine.
wouldn't even know there was anything different going on. Yeah. And so they've got this like spaceship, and you're getting in it, and it's totally unintimidating.
And it's
Very
a usable
pleasant.
vehicle. There's a lot of room for passengers. You mentioned the cargo space the other day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something you could live with. I mean, the infrastructure, I guess, is the one thing holding that kind of vehicle back right now.
And we discussed the infrastructure, and I think the consensus was that the engine should not be punished because the infrastructure isn't fully developed. That will come. You know, if the gasoline was not the vehicle of choice right now, if it was just starting out right now, people were saying, oh, we got to build these gas stations, and that will require putting these big tanks underground and filling them with this flammable fuel. You know, there'd be a lot of people, like, not in my backyard types,
right,
that would be blocking that project right and left. So we're judging the engine, not the future of the infrastructure, because that will come. And also, you mentioned, you know, recharging your EV. That takes overnight.
Yeah.
Recharging or filling up the hydrogen takes about 5 minutes.
Yeah. So that's a big deal.
And then to Byron's point, I think it's interesting the drive experience when you get in behind the wheel. There's no flashy displays or anything unusual. There's a speedometer and there's a fuel gauge, and those are the two key things that you really need to know. But beyond that, it's not like they're trying to inundate you with a lot of information.
Right.
So it's good. So
and it's definitely not, just to follow up though, it's definitely not an experiment here, let's remember, because you do have some regulations that are changing, particularly in the state of California, and the states also, you know, a dozen other states that follow the state of California, including the Northeast, which are going to follow the same ZEV rules, and they're going to need these hydrogen-powered cars to do all-wheel drive, to do the bigger vehicles, to sell in those states.
So we're going to see more of these.
We know we're going to
Definitely,
see more coming from, Honda, GM, Toyota.
And that's when the infrastructure will really take off, when everybody's on board.
Right.
So let's move on to the Mini Cooper. This is the 1.5-liter three-cylinder turbo. We tested also the 2-liter turbo, which was good and very fast, but we really liked the fuel economy in the 1.5. We were all getting, you know, better than 30 miles per gallon without a whole lot of difficulty. Great on VH. It had a 6-speed manual, 134 horsepower, and 162 pound-feet of torque. One of the editors, I think, said, if I was driving a Mini, this is the only engine that I would consider. So.
I didn't know it was a 3-cylinder when I got in it. I thought
I
took the wrong car.
Yeah.
I thought it was a 4-cylinder. And when I found out that was a 3-cylinder, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I love the Fiesta 3-cylinder, but this is a whole different kind of animal.
Yeah. It's more sporty.
It's tuned for performance rather than fuel economy, but it still delivers great fuel economy. But that car, I mean, for 3 cylinders, that thing just flies. I mean, I was just shocked, really.
Yeah.
Well, and it's more of a premium 3-cylinder. Amazing. That's maybe the next micro segment we're going to have with. But I mean, it does have balanced shafts, but it's got a lot of advanced technology in it, and I guess I love Minis. I thought it was. I love the sound of triples, and it's just really a blast to drive.
It had a nice exhaust note for a 3-cylinder.
Yes.
There was a lot of power in that vehicle considering the size of the engine. The only thing that I had a problem with, well, one of the things I had a problem with is the stop-start system. It felt like a 12-gauge shotgun recoiling when that thing operated. I swear, I thought something exploded in the car a couple of times.
It could be a tiny
It was
bit
abrupt.
smoother,
It was abrupt.
all the vehicles we drove this year with stop-start wasn't great on any of them. I don't know that anybody really nailed it.
That was a nice
was
system.
pretty good.
Yes.
You could still notice it a bit. It wasn't
Of course
totally.
you didn't notice it. The engine's shutting off and you turn it back on.
Yeah, but
I'm happy to notice that, but not when it takes the car,
You're only supposed
4
to say
wheels off the
positive.
ground.
I like the Mini Cooper's base price of under $20,000. Of course, you can load up all sorts of options, and you can take the price close to $30,000. But knowing that you can get this engine in that car for under $20,000, I think is a great bargain.
It's again base engine, and it's loads of fun.
Yep. We're going to move on to the Ram 1500 Eco Diesel 3-liter V6. This is a returning winner. 19 and 27 miles per gallon is the EPA sticker on that with an 8-speed automatic transmission, 240 horsepower, 420 pound-feet of torque. Of course, I think this is the type of engine that all of the light-duty pickup trucks should be employing because you get it out on the highway and you're going to get some pretty impressive fuel economy numbers. We were getting 24 miles per gallon, and we know that we could do better. Tell us about the Ram diesel and why it's important that this engine is on the list.
Well, the biggest takeaway for me is just the NVH. It's outstanding.
It is amazing.
It's hard to believe you're actually driving a diesel as refined as it is.
Yep.
Well, and I also liked, last year when we first tested it, the engine was still very controversial. Chrysler didn't know what the take rate was going to be. There were competitors out there saying it was a bad idea, and it was just all looked like this risky venture. And then we all said, hey, man, this really makes sense. It's a great engine. And for once, we were right.
The take rate's 20%.
Well, yeah, I was going to say 20% take rate. That's an interesting statistic as well as the ones that you mentioned. And that's on a $4,700 premium. So Americans will buy a diesel engine if it's a good diesel engine.
That's a premium. That's the premium over the base V6.
Right.
Over the Hemi V8, it's a lesser premium.
But with gasoline prices coming down and diesel prices still
right now
pretty
Oklahoma.
high, I mean, I'm wondering if that's going to affect that take rate of 20%. I mean, you're paying, what was it for the diesel option? Over $4,000?
$4,000 option compared to the V6.
Right, but it's a great engine. Like you said, the NVH is the one thing that really stands out about it.
And the fuel, and of course with a diesel, you get really good fuel economy when you're towing heavy stuff, unlike,
Oh, yeah.
So there's still, I think the buyers that are taking it really understand the benefits, and wow, I mean, I'm pleased to see it succeed.
Me too.
Well, I think the resale value, too, is better with this vehicle than with some of its competitors. I was blown away by the torque, 420 pound-feet at 2,000 RPM. I mean, that's really fantastic.
We also like the Ford 3.2-liter engine that's in the Transit van. We were kind of comparing it head-to-head with the Ram. In terms of fuel economy, our tested fuel economy was pretty close.
Very similar.
But we did give the edge to the Ram on NVH. I think they did a better job. Of course,
it's a different kind of application.
We're comparing a cargo van up against a fairly high-end, refined pickup truck.
Commercial vehicles, NVH isn't their primary concern in a commercial vehicle. But it was a great engine. It deserves a mention.
So let's move on to the Subaru WRX 2-liter turbo 4. This is, of course, a Boxer engine. Subaru loves their Boxers. We tested this engine last year in the Forester. This is the turbocharged version, but this time they've given a lot more horsepower. So we were all getting up to 27 miles per gallon tossing around this.
Which is almost the highway number.
Yeah.
That was mixed driving, almost achieving the highway number.
And that engine just really invites a lot of hard driving. You talk about neck-snapping torque. I found that to be true. With this 6-speed manual transmission, you can really just wind up the gears in that, and I loved how it pulls up, around 4,000 RPM. That just seems to keep building momentum. The higher you go in the power band, it seems like you get more power. But 268 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. Great numbers.
It's a light car too. It just feels, it's just so fast. I mean, like you said, it does feel like the harder you push it and wind it out, the more it just wants to keep going. It's a, NVH I thought was pretty good some of the times in the past. Some horizontally opposed engines like that have a little extra kind of NVH issues. But this car, I think they did a great job. And Subarus, like you said, they like their Boxer engines, and they've kept getting better. Every generation they keep improving on them, and this is the best I've ever driven from Subaru.
Yep.
And unlike so many Turbo 4s, this one actually delivered on the promise of power and fuel efficiency, which has been the downfall of many of the Turbo 4s we've tested, that they don't deliver on the fuel economy angle anyway.
We had, just for the record, 15 four-cylinder turbocharged engines in the competition this year. That was more than any other powertrain segment, a ton of them. Everybody's putting out these four-cylinder turbos, and I think Drew's point was they're starting to seem a lot alike because there's so many of them.
They're all good, but
They're
I mean,
all
I would just add with this, the engine is a perfect match for that car, that WRX, and the two just go together so nicely.
Yep. and another turbocharged small 4 in the Volkswagen Golf, the 1.8-liter TSI engine. Now, this is part of the EA 888 engine family, of course, a modular engine family that is spawning lots of other engines. This is a returning winner. As tested, sticker price under $22,000 with a phenomenal engine as far as I'm concerned. 5-speed manual transmission, 170 horsepower, 200 pound-feet of torque. I mean, and then, you know, we were getting up to 38 miles per gallon driving that vehicle, and that's 38 miles per gallon, I said. That's pretty darn good. So we had a lot of these, EA 888 engines in the competition. We had the GTI, the Volkswagen GTI, and also the Audi S3, higher output, more displacement, 2-liter turbos. But ultimately, we all decided that the 1.8 was better in terms of fuel economy and in terms of NVH.
It just did everything well, too. It was just fun to drive. If that's a car that people can afford. I mean, it's a mid-price. It's not a real cheap car, but it's affordable. Sure. And to have, that would be you can't. There's nothing. You're not sacrificing anything with that car. The transmission's good. The engine's good. The fuel economy is good. The NVH is good. I mean, that engine I just thought did more things right than a lot of the engines in our competition this year.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. There's hardly anything to find wrong with it.
There isn't.
You mentioned the bargain, $22,000 as tested, and you were talking about the engine matching the application on the WRX. Here again, perfect for the Golf.
Yeah. Well, and this engine last year we tested it in the Jetta, which was more expensive and it was heavier. So it's kind of a no-brainer. Now it's in this all-new Golf, which is lighter, a little more functional. I happen to like hatchbacks. So less expensive, lighter weight, and same power and torque. And, I just think it's a great package.
Better mileage.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Volvo S60, last but not least. This is the T5, not the T6. The T5 is their nomenclature for a 2-liter turbocharged engine. The T6 is the up-level version that has both turbo and supercharging.
Right.
So with that one, you're getting 302 horsepower. With the T5, it's not quite that high, but we really like the fuel efficiency. Just outstanding numbers. For a 2-liter turbo to be getting, I see here, 31.8 miles per gallon. One of the editors got 31.8 miles per gallon, and everybody was around 30, which is really impressive considering that this is a bigger car and making great power. 8-speed automatic transmission helps quite a bit with that, but Volvo is really onto something here. And of course, all of their engines are going to be 4-cylinder in all their vehicles, and I think it's the T6, which is the turbo supercharged, that's going to go in the Volvo XC90, a bigger
That's right, and
CUV, which
too.
would be interesting to see how it does in that that vehicle.
This is Volvo's first kind of venture away from Ford. They're cutting ties completely with Ford-supplied engines, and I think this was built from the ground up by Volvo engineers with some backing from their owners, Geely. And I think they did a phenomenal job. I mean, Volvo's still a small manufacturer. They might not have the technical, manpower that a lot of the bigger companies have. But this engine, they put this together, and the fuel economy is really good. The power is really good. It's quiet, which is important in a Volvo. I just think it's a phenomenal first effort from Volvo, and I think this 4-cylinder, like you said, all 4-cylinder powertrain strategy is going to serve them well in the future.
It's good to see that the Chinese owners really do value great engines.
Right.
So they're putting the the resources behind
developing an engine from ground up is not inexpensive. It's very costly, and they got the investment they needed and pulled it off.
So there's our Ward's 10 Best Engines for 2015. We're going to talk a bit more about those that didn't make it. They were close but didn't make it, and that's going to be in a separate video. So click on that tab there on the website, and you can learn more about the other engines that we were also very close to putting on our list this year. Thanks.